The sound was so soft at first that the ranger thought it was the wind. 3 faint knocks against the wood. Knock, knock, knock. He looked out the window and saw no one. Outside, dawn was just beginning to paint the plains gold. The birds had not yet begun to sing. The silence was thick and strange. He approached the door cautiously, hand on the doorknob, and heard it again. Knock, knock, but this time accompanied by a moan, almost human. When he opened the door, his heart stopped. In front of him, on the porch, stood a small gorilla, soaked in mud and trembling. Its huge bright eyes looked at him in despair. It had a wound on its shoulder and was breathing heavily. "What the hell?" the ranger whispered, crouching slowly. The little one took a wobbly step forward and pointed its trembling hand toward the forest, as if trying to say something. The man understood this wasn't a casual visit. Something had happened out there. He knelt, reaching out cautiously, but the baby didn't retreat. It just let out a soft cry, a plea that seemed to come from the soul. In its gaze there was both fear and urgency. "Easy, little one," said the ranger, his voice breaking. "I'll help you, I promise." He grabbed a blanket and gently wrapped the small, weakened body that could barely stand. As he lifted it, he felt the baby gorilla's heart pounding fast against his chest. Then a distant roar shook the jungle, a deep, mournful sound filled with anguish. The man raised his eyes toward the horizon, and everything became clear. The little one hadn't come on its own. It had come to ask for help. Its family was in danger. The roar echoed again, closer now, more desperate. The ranger clenched his jaw, looked at the baby, then at the forest. "Let's go," he said firmly. "Let's find your mother." He placed the little gorilla on the seat of his jeep and covered it with the blanket. The animal breathed quickly, eyes fixed on the line of trees in the distance, as if it knew exactly where to go. The man started the engine, the sound shattering the morning silence. A flock of birds took flight. The air was thick with humidity, and the ground still sparkled with dew. As they drove, the baby let out short whimpers, tapping softly on the dashboard whenever the vehicle slowed. "Easy, easy now," the ranger murmured, trying to calm it. "I'll take you there. Just show me the way." The path grew difficult. The jeep sank into mud. Branches scraped against the windshield. The ranger stopped the engine and continued on foot. The baby jumped down unsteadily and began moving through the undergrowth, glancing back now and then to make sure the man followed. The jungle was alive. Every sound amplified. Insects, birds, the crunch of leaves beneath his boots. Then the roar sounded again, not just a noise but a cry of pain, long and deep, charged with despair. The baby froze, lifted its head, and answered with a short, trembling cry. The ranger's skin prickled. He quickened his pace, pushing aside branches and leaping over roots. His heart pounded wildly. When he finally reached the clearing, the sight before him stole his breath. A huge tree had fallen, torn from its roots by a recent storm. Beneath its weight, an adult gorilla struggled to breathe. Its chest rose and fell painfully, and its right arm was pinned between the trunk and the ground. The earth around was disturbed, full of prints and broken branches. It was clear the baby had tried to move the trunk alone. The ranger froze, gauging the distance. He knew how dangerous it was to approach a full-grown male, even one wounded. But something in the gorilla's eyes stopped him. There was no rage, only pain. The baby ran to him, knelt beside the trunk, and touched the adult's hand, letting out a low, guttural sound full of sorrow. The man took a deep breath. "Easy," he whispered gently. "I'm going to help you." He removed his backpack, pulled out a rope, and examined the trunk. It was massive, impossibly heavy without leverage. Searching the ground, he found a thick branch that might serve as a pry bar. The baby watched silently, as if understanding. The ranger wedged the branch under the trunk and threw his weight onto it. Nothing. He tried again. Sweat streamed down his forehead, mud coated his hands. Come on," he muttered desperately, pushing harder. Then something changed. The baby, imitating his movement, pressed its small hands against the branch too. The ranger felt an extra force, not physical but emotional, that drove him to keep going. A cracking sound echoed from the trunk's base. The soil shifted slightly. "That's it," he shouted. "Keep going, little one." With one final effort, the branch gave, and the trunk lifted just enough for the adult to free his arm and roll aside. The sound that followed was a brief, powerful roar, part pain, part relief. The man fell back, panting. The baby rushed to its father, wrapping both arms around him, crying out in joy. The ranger dropped to his knees, breathless. He had seen many things in his life, but nothing like that. Two wild beings capable of feeling and acting with a humanity most men had forgotten. The adult rose slowly, fixing his gaze on the human. A heavy silence fell between them. Then the gorilla took a step forward, placed one hand on the ground, and with a slight nod, seemed to acknowledge his help. The ranger understood. "You're welcome, my friend," he whispered with an exhausted smile. The forest seemed to breathe again. The sun was rising as the ranger began his way back. Behind him, the great ape sat calmly beside his young. The sight was otherworldly. Strength and tenderness fused in a single moment. He didn't dare look back more than once. The jungle doesn't forgive insolent witnesses. But when he did, he saw it. The gorilla watching him with an almost human stillness, the baby resting against his chest. That was enough. Words were no longer needed. He walked for hours, clothes soaked, body caked in mud, soul trembling with something beyond description. When he finally reached the ranger station, the air smelled of damp wood and kerosene. The cabin was empty. He dropped his pack on the table and collapsed into the chair. Turning on the generator, he grabbed a notebook and began to write with trembling hands. Unscheduled observation. Direct intervention in critical situation. Adult male released. Juvenile present. Cooperative, non-aggressive behavior, he wrote, though he knew no one would believe it, not even himself. How could he explain that a gorilla had trusted a human? How could he convince his superiors that the jungle itself could ask for help? He closed the notebook and sighed. Only the hum of insects filled the silence. That night the rain returned, not hard, but steady, like a whisper. The man fell asleep at the table with the lamp still lit. He dreamed of branches, of black eyes watching him through mist, of a roar, not of threat, but of farewell. At dawn, something woke him. 3 soft, precise knocks at the door. Knock, knock, knock. The ranger shot upright, heart racing. For a moment he thought he was dreaming again, but the sound repeated. He ran to the door and opened it. There, on the porch, stood the baby gorilla, drenched in drizzle, covered in leaves and dirt, trembling like the first time. But now, it wasn't crying. It looked at him firmly, almost smiling. "It can't be," the man murmured. "How did you get here?" The baby took a step forward, extended one hand, and pointed toward the forest, just like that morning. But this time, it didn't seem to be asking for help. It was offering something. In its other hand, it held a broken branch, still damp, with a clear mark where the tree had split during the rescue. The ranger took it carefully, unsure what to say. The little one made a soft sound, almost a purr, and rested its head against his leg. The man smiled, moved. "So you wanted to show me you're okay." The baby looked up, lips twitching as if trying to imitate a human smile. Then it turned and looked toward the horizon where the jungle began. It walked a few steps, stopped, and looked back, waiting. The message was clear. It wanted him to come along. The ranger stood frozen, torn between logic and heart. He could lose his job, his reputation, even his life. But he knew that if he didn't follow, he'd lose something greater, the meaning of his calling. He turned off the lamp, took his radio, and slipped it into his pocket. "All right, little one," he said. "Show me the way again." And together, man and gorilla disappeared into the trees under the first light of a new day. The path grew narrower, tangled with roots and wet leaves. The ranger followed behind the small gorilla, who moved with surprising agility through the bushes. Every so often it would stop, glance back, and make a short sound, ensuring the human was still there. The man no longer felt fear. There was something hypnotic in how the forest enveloped them, in how sunlight filtered through the canopy, painting the earth in golden patches. Suddenly, the baby stopped. Silence fell like a weight. Not a single bird sang. The ranger crouched, listening. He heard something ahead, a rough, labored breathing. He pushed through some branches and saw him. The adult gorilla, the same one he had freed from the tree, lay there beside a fallen trunk, breathing heavily. The wound on his arm was still open, blood dried across his fur, flies buzzing around. The ranger stepped forward. Slowly, easy, he whispered, voice low, like speaking to a wounded friend. The male lifted his head. Their eyes met instantly. For a second, tension filled the air. The baby ran to its father and nestled at his side, making soft, plaintive sounds. The man knelt at a safe distance, took out disinfectant and bandages from his bag. He knew approaching could mean his death, but not doing so would mean the gorilla's. He took a deep breath. "I'm going to help you again," he said, locking eyes with the male. The baby looked at the man, then at its father, then stepped forward, touching the human's hand with its own small, warm one and placing it over the adult's injured arm. The message was clear. The ranger didn't hesitate anymore. He tore his shirt, cleaned the wound, poured disinfectant. The gorilla roared, a deep, thunderous sound that shook the leaves, but didn't attack. He just gritted his teeth, enduring the pain. The baby stroked his face, trying to calm him. The ranger worked quickly, wrapping the bandage tight, then stepped back, waiting. The gorilla breathed deeply, chest rising and falling slowly. And then something extraordinary happened. The male extended his enormous hand, not in aggression, but seeking support. The ranger hesitated for an instant, then took it. The skin was rough, warm, alive. That brief contact sealed something neither could ever explain. Not submission, but recognition. Respect. A distant sound broke the moment. A gunshot. The ranger's head shot up. The baby clung to its father's chest. The male growled, furious, staring toward the noise. "Poachers," the man whispered, cold with dread. They were too close to the restricted zone, a place where hunters had been prowling for weeks. He couldn't leave them there. He looked from the gorilla to the baby, and made his decision. "We have to move," he said, more to himself than to them. With quick gestures, he pointed toward a hidden trail leading to the ravine. The male hesitated, but the baby had already taken the first steps. The man followed, heart hammering as the father's deep roars echoed behind, keeping pace. The jungle had changed. It was no longer a refuge. It was a battlefield. And the ranger knew that from that moment on, he wasn't just protecting animals. He was protecting a family. The forest became a maze of shadows. The ranger moved with his machete in one hand and his flashlight in the other, though he barely dared to use it. Any light could give them away. Behind him, the baby moved silently, alert to every sound. The air smelled of smoke and gunpowder. Voices in the distance. "Over here," someone whispered. Fresh tracks. The ranger's heart pounded faster. The poachers were close, too close. He crouched behind a trunk, pushing the baby down beside him. "Don't make a sound," he whispered. The little one looked at him, understanding more than any animal should. Then a gunshot thundered. The echo rolled through the trees. The ranger lifted his head just in time to see a figure moving through the ferns. Then, a deafening roar split the air. The male appeared, emerging from the mist like a living shadow, beating his chest furiously. His voice shook the jungle. The poachers froze, rifles raised, paralyzed by the sound. "Fire!" one shouted. The first shot whistled past. The ranger dove to the ground. The baby screamed, but before a second shot could ring out, the great gorilla charged. The earth trembled. The first poacher fell backward, weapon flying into the brush. The others ran, stumbling in panic. The ranger tried to stand, but a slick trunk gave way beneath him, trapping his leg. Pain shot through him, sharp and blinding. "No!" he shouted, struggling to free himself. The baby ran to him, tugging at his pants as the father returned, breathing heavily, blood staining his bandaged arm. The hunters were gone, but danger remained. The trunk pinning the man was too heavy. The gorilla stepped closer, remembering. Those same black, soulful eyes met his, filled now with fear and compassion. The ranger tried to move, but agony stopped him. "Help me," he gasped. The male studied the situation, then placed his massive hands on the trunk and began to lift. His muscles strained, the ground groaned beneath him. A roar burst from his chest, not of anger, but of effort. The ranger felt the pressure ease on his leg. "That's it. Come on, you can do it," he shouted. The trunk shifted just enough for him to pull free. He collapsed backward, gasping. The gorilla stood over him, breathing hard. The baby nestled close to its father. The ranger tried to rise, but his leg was bleeding. The male stepped forward, grasped his arm, and helped him stand. For a moment they looked into each other's eyes, human and beast, both wounded, both alive. And there, in the heart of the jungle, the ranger understood. The circle had closed. The gorilla he had saved was now saving him. Far off, the first rays of dawn broke through the canopy. The man placed his hand on the gorilla's chest, feeling its heartbeat. "Thank you," he whispered. The gorilla nodded slightly as if he understood. Then, without a sound, he turned toward the forest with his child and vanished into the mist. The ranger stood alone, limping, eyes fixed on the path they had taken. The jungle, moments ago chaos and fear, was now still. Only the birdsong broke the calm, as if the forest were celebrating an invisible pact between two worlds. He hobbled on, using a thick branch as a cane. Mud caked his knees, and his injured leg burned with every step, but he kept going. The jungle opened before him, an endless corridor of shadows and light. It no longer felt threatening. He could hear it breathe. The birds, the rustling leaves, the hum of insects, all speaking a language he was only just beginning to understand. Every tree was a silent witness. Every breeze, a farewell touch. It took him hours to reach the station. When he pushed open the door, the smell of wet wood greeted him again. The lamp was still on the table where he'd left it. He started the generator and dropped into the chair, exhausted. For a while, he did nothing, just breathed and listened. Then he opened his notebook, hands trembling, not from pain, but from emotion, and wrote slowly. "The gorilla saved my life." There was no fear, no violence, only a choice. He chose to trust. The words felt small, inadequate compared to what he had witnessed. He paused, looked out the window toward the forest. There, through the mist, he thought he saw a shadow move. A large, dark figure walking with a smaller one in its arms. He smiled. He knew it wasn't an illusion. He took his canteen, cleaned it, and placed it on the windowsill facing the forest. Not as an offering this time, but as a sign. If you ever return, you'll know there's a friend here. That night, the radio crackled for the first time in days. A distant voice called out, "Base 14, do you copy? Everything in order?" The ranger held the microphone, hesitating. He could tell the truth, but who would believe it? He could mention poachers, wounds, a rescue, but not what had truly happened. Finally, he replied, "This is Base 14. Everything's in order. The jungle is calm." He hung up, looked down at his hands, scarred, dirty, a red mark around his wrist, the imprint of the gorilla's grip when he lifted the trunk. A living mark. A reminder. Outside, dawn painted the sky orange. The jungle awoke with its usual chorus, as if nothing had happened, but he knew something had changed. Not the jungle. Himself.